What's up, guys? Welcome back to another YouTube live, SnowTrax live, I guess, brought to you by Skidoo. Today I'm wearing my Skidoo sweater. I actually don't own any sweaters other than this one that don't have a hood on them, so not that that's important in any way to any of you guys, but it is a fact. Yeah, so super excited for you guys to be back. It's been 2 weeks. Honestly, like, I really missed last week, and I don't know, Tuesday just rolled around. I was like, oh man, why am I not online chatting with people? It would have been so great. But again, we're going to start doing these every other week, so I'm just going to have to be patient, as will we all. Today I want to talk about technology, and we'll start out, as I've always said, talking sort of Skidoo technology, and then we'll go somewhere else with it. But I do, as every week, want to point out that this whole SnowTrax Live thing is brought to you by Skidoo. We're great partners with Skidoo. We very much appreciate them working with us on this project and bringing it to you guys. I really love doing this, so it's been great for me. With that said, we will start off with the topic that is Skidoo centric, and then we will go anywhere you guys want to go with any comments or questions you guys have about anything in the industry or surrounding the industry. So that's how this works. But I always want to give out that shout out to Skidoo for helping us out with this, because it benefits everybody and we really appreciate it. So this week, we're going to talk about technology. And the reason I wanted to talk about technology is because we are seeing such a massive influx of technology, and it's advancing every year. There's more and more of it. I mean, we started out really with e-tech as being technology. That was sort of one of the big ones. That was engine technology. And when it hit the ground, everybody was blown away by how adding technology to a motor like that improved things so much. I mean, I guess if you want to go even further back, we'll talk about EFI, right? That was the first sort of technology in snowmobile engines, and it had a rocky start, but got going. And then we got things, we move into things like digital gauges with GPS and group ride, and we've got smart suspension. We've got shot on Skidoos, which is a massive piece of technology that is amazing. And then we get into like the outer surrounding stuff. We've got gear with heated helmets and gloves and boots and vests and wireless communication and Bluetooth and all this stuff. It's a lot of technology, a lot of it. I guess if you go all the way back, the first real piece of technology on a snowmobile is probably electric start, if you really want to go back that far. If anybody has anything else that came out first that was technological on a snowmobile, you can let me know. But yeah, that's where I'm at with this conversation. So just wanted to see what you guys think. What do you think of technology in the industry right now? What do you think of what Skidoo's doing with technology, how they're pushing boundaries and they're constantly moving ahead every year? The 10.25 display has now come into a zone where it is equally as advanced as everybody else's displays in the market right now, with built-in GPS, with really effective, easy to use group ride functions, and obviously GPS mapping and all those things that come along with that. So what do you guys think? Joshua Reed, no more squeaky chair. Give it a minute. It's there. We have 3 chairs, and unfortunately they all squeak. Chris Broad, hope we can talk about the rumors that BRP has finally put out a service advisory for a fuel pump fuel filter issue on ACE and EFI engines. We're not going to talk about that because I have no idea, and I can't comment on that stuff, so I have no idea. Joshua Reed, I got my XRS 900 since the last show. Awesome, man. Way to go. That's got to feel amazing. Obviously, we have our XRS 850 in the background here. We actually did get, last week we had 5.5, almost 6 inches of snow here. If Mark was home, he's in Myrtle Beach with my mom on a holiday right now. They're on their way back today. But if he was home, he would have gone riding on the rail bed for sure. Our local rail bed is flat, smooth, and he would have definitely taken a sled out and worn the carbides right off it just to say he did it. So probably a good thing he's not home, but it's coming. Winter's coming, and I'm pumped. Schwartz Media, we call them crew necks here in Michigan. Thank you. It's a sweater, but I'll take whatever. Mike K, hopefully I didn't make a mistake with Smart Shox. I don't think you did, man. I really don't. Smart Shox maybe isn't technology for everybody. Maybe not everybody will benefit from it. But even if you don't necessarily benefit from it, you will like it because it adds functionality that you don't have with standard shocks. So there are people out there who simply don't need it because they want to tinker with their own shocks. They know what they're doing. They understand all the different settings. And they like that. And then there are people who are set it and forget it kind of people who really don't want to think about their suspension. They just want it to do the same thing all the time. Those two groups of people might not benefit as much from smart shocks. But the person who wants adaptive ride quality, let's call it, then smart shocks are going to be a benefit to them for sure. And also benefits to handling across the board, which is always nice. So yeah, there's that to think about. Pro AV 603 is the Skidoo 10.25 relocation kit. Skidoo's admittance that the Polaris 7S is in a better spot. I don't know. I haven't looked too close into that kit. I know it exists, but I haven't really looked at it. There are times when the gauge is perfect, and there are times when I wish it was at a different angle. But I can also say that for Polaris's gauge too. It's not always at the perfect angle. So yeah, I think they maybe like on an airplane TV in the back of the seat, it can angle a bit. Maybe that would be something they can give us, is the ability to just angle the gauge back and forth a few degrees to perfectly suit our height, right? Because the height's all different. Anybody who's a different height is going to see the gauge from a different angle, and that might have might make a difference in how it looks to you and whether or not you feel like you need to change it. Sunset Trail Rider, cigarette lighter. Awesome. Okay. You can be like with your modular helmet opening your cigarette, and as you're driving down the trail, the wind is blowing the cigarette. It's burning super fast. I've actually seen that, and it's hilarious. Short Shots Media. My last sled was an 02 MXZ, and I just bought a 2025, and the tech is amazing compared to that 02. You bet it is. That's 24 years. That's a long time, man. That is a lot of water under the bridge. That is a lot of engineering hours and people in design studios coming up with great ideas. And if you ever have looked into Skidoo's design center, it's wildly impressive, and it's one of the reasons Skidoo is where they are today, is that their dedication to design and innovation. So they have a whole building just dedicated to that. It's pretty awesome. Pro AV 603, can you briefly compare the BRP 10.25 with the Polaris 7S? Okay, yeah, I definitely can do that. I mean, just physically, the 7S is like more narrow but taller. I would say that the bezel around the 7S looks more, it doesn't look as clean. The 10.25, the way it sits flat in the dash, looks really clean, looks something like what you find in your car, whereas the 7S looks like it's been installed. As far as technology goes, as far as I know, and I'll be honest, I haven't gone in and checked every setting, but as far as I know, the two things 7S has that 10.25 doesn't is built-in GPS with mapping and smart warmers. Those are the two things I know that 7S does. You can get mapping in your 10.25 if your phone is plugged in and you're using the BRP Go app. But they do not have smart warmers the way Polaris does. There are settings you can adjust, but it's not the same thing. Other than that, the widescreen display on the 10.25 is really nice looking. It's a very nice looking gauge, very professional. But it isn't as customizable as the 10.2, or sorry, as the 7S either. The 7S, your gauge screen, every piece of information on your gauge screen is adjustable. Where it sits in the screen, there's multiple options for how you want it displayed. So those are the things that I would say different. My opinion, if Polaris had a bit bigger gauge that was a little slicker integrated into the dash, there would be no contest. But as it sits, there's benefits to both, and I think they're fairly equal when you factor in everything. Nukarad 40K, I would say the factory turbo falls in that category too. Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. That is a piece of technology that was a long time coming, and it's pretty awesome, especially on the Skidoo because of the way their wastegate system works, and it's all just so high tech. I mean, extremely high tech, and you're absolutely right. The turbos fall in there. Sled 519, I think I'm just waiting for BRP to broadcast an HUD into my oxygen helmet like my truck does on my windshield. Honestly, that is so funny you say that, because it was years ago, 2006, I had a Pontiac Grand Prix GXP that had a heads-up display in the windshield. And I was like, man, why can't I get this on my sled? Like, why can't I have this in my face shield where I can just see the information? It would be so awesome. So it's funny you say that, because I 100% agree with you. Northwood Snowmobiling LLC. Okay, I love that you just said that, man. I absolutely love it. Is it me or are sledders the most demanding for ever-changing innovation but then also complain about costs at the same time? Yes, man. Yes, that is the thing. We are all begging for more technology, better performance, better ride quality, better ergonomics, more stuff. But then when it costs money, we all go, "Ah, it's too expensive." Like, I mean, if you want a cheap snowmobile, look at the Polaris Shift back in the day, right? It didn't even come with a thumb warmer. It didn't have a gas gauge. The cap was the gas gauge. It didn't have rear idler wheels, and it was cheap. People didn't buy it, and that's weird because that should have been the sled that people went to when they wanted to save that money but still have performance, because it still rode and handled and had a great motor in it. But people apparently do want the functions and the features and the innovation. They just don't want to pay for it. And I don't know how people come to that thought process. I don't know where that comes from. Let's see. Skidoo is getting there, but I navigate regularly with BRP Go up in Quebec. I like all the new add-ons, embedded maps, group ride. It's unfortunate they are totally separate from the BRP Go up. That's interesting because you're saying it's separate from the app, but we've always been complaining that we want it off of the app and on the screen. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know if what you mean is that you navigate with the app. This is Joshua Reed, by the way. Navigate with the app, but don't use the screen. So I'm not sure, but yeah. Marshall Martin, what's the fastest sled Skidoo has now? I would think it's probably one of the 4-stroke turbos, like an XRS turbo, I would think. You know, they don't make the Mach Z anymore, but that would be my guess. I don't think the 2-stroke turbo is faster than the 4-strokes at this point. It might be close. Lawrence Beal, have you heard about getting Smart Shox tuned? So interestingly, where was I? I was with some Skidoo guys at some point in the past year, and they showed me how the Smart Shox actually have the spot for the clicker in them. It just doesn't have the knob, and you can buy the knob, take the screw out, put the knob in, and adjust your Smart Shox. So I mean, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, if you're talking about having them tuned like at a Shox shop, you know, to go in and have them actually revalved or whatever. I don't know anything about that. They're pretty high-tech stuff as far as I know inside. But what I do know is that there have been guys who have told me that they added clickers to their Smart Shox. I don't know how that works. I don't know how that interacts with the Smart Shox technology and all that. But it's pretty interesting that it seemed like it was possible. Dino C, you're watching. Are you watching from Dominican Republic right now on the beach? You suck, dude. You don't. I mean, congratulations, but also it was cold here today, and I was out filming all day, and I was like shivering. It was crap, but it means snow's coming, and the lakes are all froze with like an inch of ice. So I'm happy. My body's not ready for it yet. Northwood Snowmobile LLC. Do I think Polaris missed out on not making their new fuel caddy stackable like Skidoo? I got to be perfectly honest with you, man. We are still producing dirt tracks right now, so I have not had a chance to go and look at all the new snowmobile stuff. I got the press release for the fuel caddy, but I didn't go in and like read all about it. So if it's not stackable, then yeah, I kind of think that might be a missed opportunity. That's one of the things that's great about Link is, you know, depending on what parts you get, you can actually stack them. Some parts you can't, some parts you can, but yeah, being able to stack those types of things gives you more options. And more carrying capacity, right? Mike, I'm going to say your last name wrong. Pylon or Pylon, OFSC and the integrated GPS systems in sleds. Seems like Ontario is being left behind. That is actually an Ontario problem, not a manufacturer problem. Manufacturers have been trying to get maps from Ontario, but Ontario, I believe, has been resistant to that for whatever reason. I think it is totally crazy. Just give us maps, even if they're not perfect, even if they're not perfectly accurate, just give us the maps so they're there. I think it's probably a bit of a safety concern too. If you have the maps, then you know where you're going. At least worst case scenario, you'll get to a town, you'll get off the trail if you really need to. So I think the OFSC needs to step up. Does Skidoo have an upgrade path to the 10.25 from the 4.5, like an upgrade kit? Polaris does have an upgrade kit to the 7S. That is true, Short Shots Media. I don't know that about Skidoo. We've done an upgrade with the 7S on a Polaris, but I don't know that we've ever done an upgrade with a Skidoo to the 10.25. But that is something worth looking into if you can. I don't see why you couldn't. There aren't, like, I mean, it's got to have a plug in the harness, but the 4.2 or the 4.5 display still reads out RPM and all that kind of stuff. So it's got to have a harness going into it from, you know, the actual engine ECU. and that would be where all the other information comes for the 10.25. So I would think as long as the plugs are the same coming from the ECU, then it would work, but that's something I haven't looked into. Andrew Lawson, what do I like for helmet communication systems and group rides? To be perfectly honest, I don't. I don't want people talking in my head while I'm riding. I don't even like listening to music when I ride. I want to hear the sled. That's why I want the full immersive snowmobile experience. But if I was going to wear one, I do like Cardo systems. I've used them on motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, and snowmobiles, and they work really well. We've been using them on the show for a couple seasons now, and they are excellent. But that is an addition to your helmet. They are a bit finicky. All of these things are finicky, so that's something to consider. But for me, I've used Senna's, I've used Cardos, I've used no-name brand ones, and I really like the Cardos right now. So, yeah. Travis Silk, can you compare the Polaris Boost to the Skidoo 850 Turbo R? That's a hard one. I mean, yes, I can. It would be a whole episode, really, and maybe that'll be next week's episode. We'll talk about Turbo 2-stroke, not next week, 2 weeks from now. But just in a nutshell, really, really quick, the Polaris Boost is more visceral. It's angrier. It's got attitude. The Skidoo is very refined. That's the way I would describe the two of them. They make excellent power down low. They pull really, really hard. There are differences in both of those attributes, but for the most part, they are very similar in terms of like overall experience. But the Polaris is a little bit less refined, which gives you more of a visceral experience, whereas the Skidoo is much more refined, which gives you a sort of a much smoother kind of, it gives you like just a more refined feel. That's the best way I can say it. So that's the best I can do for you right now. First Amendment t-shirt, technology we don't need. Well, there's a lot of people out there who agree with you that we don't need more technology. And then there's people out there who really, really like technology. And what I like is that there are a lot of these brands who will give you the option. You know, you can still have an XRS without the 10.25 display and without Smart Shox. So you can get a pretty, you know, low-tech XRS. It's still got technology, but much less so than all of the stuff. So yeah, you can do that. But there are people who don't like it, and there are people who do. I remember when Polaris first brought out the 7S, it was like, oh man, now I got a screen in front of my face, and now it's interrupting my riding, and I keep looking at the screen. It's like, just don't look at the screen, you know? Like, you don't have to look at the screen. You can look at the trail. Is it a distraction? It could be, but also there's some self-control going on there too, right? Dino C, is it worth it to add the new GPS module that the 26 comes with to my 24? Yeah, definitely. I mean, having built-in GPS is just more convenient than having to always have your phone plugged in if you want to see where you're going. And even using breadcrumb trails, if it doesn't have the map database loaded, that's still helpful to get you home, you know, in a pinch. So I think it's worth it. Cole Varsho, do you feel that Smart Shox are worth the price? Have you the opportunity to ride both the standard and Smart Shox back to back? Yes, absolutely we have. A lot, actually. And that is a very subjective question. AJ and I both feel that we wouldn't pay for Smart Shox. We actually really like this sled behind us with these, you know, high-end shocks. Once you get them set right, they work amazing. But my dad, Mark, and Mike as well, who's a host on the show, they both love Smart Shox and would definitely pay for it. So it really depends. Unfortunately, I realize not everybody has the opportunity to ride them back to back as I do. If you are somebody, I said this earlier, who likes to tinker, who likes to set and forget, who likes to, you know what your shocks are doing all the time, then maybe you don't. And if you're the kind of person who wants to just let the shocks think for them and adjust for you, give you those benefits, then maybe they would work for you. So yeah, that's kind of the best I can do for that. Ron Kessler, do the Smart Shox need more frequent rebuild oil changes because it's constantly adjusting? I don't think so. The adjusting doesn't have anything to do with the oil. I mean, it obviously does, but it doesn't have anything to do with affecting the oil. It's just changing an aperture. So it really doesn't require any extra. I mean, arguably you could say that maybe it would require less because it's always damping correctly as opposed to over compressing oil or whatever, overheating. It's doing a better job at that. That's totally my opinion. There's no logic or science behind that. That's just a thought that popped in my head when I was thinking about your answer. So that's the best I can do there. Chris Schneebel, I want cheese curds from Hook. Uh-huh. I was going to go there today. Chad Gale, people want all the tech and don't want to pay for it. They think tech is cheap, and it's far from that. You're absolutely right. We talked about that just a minute ago. 100%. If you want tech, you're going to have to pay for it. There's a reason that a Cadillac is more expensive than a Suburban. You know, an Escalade is more expensive than a Suburban. It's because it comes with electro ride suspension and blah blah blah, so it costs more, and that's sort of what we're getting at in the snowmobile industry now, where you're going to start paying more for that stuff. However, there is an adrenaline package that doesn't have all the tech, and you can go ahead and buy that. And you know, you can, as I said earlier, select if you're going to early order your XRS without the gauge and without the smart shocks, and you know, I don't mean this in a negative way, but dumb it down, you know, is essentially what we're talking about. That doesn't mean it's bad. I'm not going to try with your name, Snurf, or whatever. Arctic Cat sending you sleds this year. Yes, they are. We are getting two. We are getting an EXT and an EXT and I think a Snow Pro. An EXT is an 858 and a Snow Pro 600. So we're pretty pumped about that, to have those sleds on the snow all winter long this year. It'll be the first time we had a 858 on the snow all winter, so I'm pretty pumped. And yeah, so stay tuned for more information on that. Northwood Snowmobile LLC, with the recent purchase of Arctic Cat and Yamaha exiting, will Cat still produce kids sleds for the other manufacturers like they previously did? I don't see why not. And the reason I don't see why not is that Arctic Cat is the one producing those sleds. It wasn't Yamaha. Yamaha was not producing the sleds. Arctic Cat was producing the kids sleds for Yamaha. So yeah, I mean, I think that they will continue to do that. The news that the Kitty Cat, this is the last year for the Kitty Cat, doesn't mean they're not selling a 120. They're just not selling the 120 with the Kitty Cat graphics on it, the retro graphics like they had this year. That'll be a one-time thing. But the 120 and the 200s, as far as I know, are going to stay in their lineup for a long time. And whether the other manufacturers are going to have them build, other manufacturers at this point being Skidoo only, build their 200s, I don't know. But I can't see why they wouldn't. Craig Lowery, it sounds like you can add a module to the 10.25 screen to display GPS, downloading maps to my sled right now. Yes, you can. To the older models that didn't come with it, the GPS module is something you can add to your older displays, that's for sure. Lawrence Beal, fastest Skidoo sled is a tuned 850 Turbo R. That's not a fair answer, man. Tuned means it's not stock. If you're talking stock, then you got to talk that way. And if you want to put up a tuned 850 Turbo R against a tuned 900 Turbo R, I know that 900 Turbo R is capable of making more horsepower than the two-stroke, and definitely capable of making more horsepower and surviving, that's for sure. But on the snow, stock for stock, I think probably the four-stroke is a little bit faster. Kevin Harner, technology complaint. Somewhere between 2021 and 2024, Skidoo Summit tethers changed and are not backwards compatibles. I can't purchase a spare tether and have both sleds programmed alike. Interesting. I didn't know that. That's a very interesting point to make. Is it the way they connect, or is it the programming inside of them that's different? If it's the way they connect, maybe you can buy the tether base to make them work. If it's the programming, that's way out there. I don't know. Again, though, maybe you could buy the tether base and it's where the programming is. No idea. I'm not very technologically advanced. Like, I know how to use my computer and my phone and my tablet, but technology goes above my head. I want to push a throttle and go fast. I don't want to think about other stuff. Let's see. Do you find the Lynx 850 to run a little better, different than the Skidoo 850? My 25 Lynx seems to be a tick stronger. You know what? I don't notice that, and we've had both for the last 3 years. We've had both, so they've been completely comparable. I think that the Lynx feels a little snappier, but I think that has a lot to do with the way the rear suspension and ergonomics interact with the chassis, the way, just the way you interact with the sled, it makes it feel a little snappier, but I don't think it necessarily is. I know that Rotax prides themselves on making sure all of their 850s are very similar, motor after motor after motor, but there will be variations, and maybe that's what you're feeling, is one is just a little bit different. I mean, I remember back in the 2000s, sleds were, you could get an 800 Polaris that did 100 miles an hour and an 800 Polaris that barely do 80, and they were the same sled. They were so inconsistent. They're a lot better now. All sleds are a lot better now, but there's still inconsistencies. Nuka Rad 40K, can you add the 7S to the newer Polaris sleds that are still on axis like the 2024 Titan? Good question. I know there are Titans that have the 7S, so I would assume if there are models that have it, then you can add it. That would be my best comment there would be if you see a model like that that has a 7S and yours doesn't, then you can probably add it to yours. But if you see that there's a sled like yours and they never came with a 7S, then I would assume maybe they can't. They won't have the right connections or whatever. VES Vintage Evolution Skateboards. I'm just praying for snow. You and me, buddy. We're praying for snow every day, and I mean that literally. I can't wait. The cold, it always hits me like a ton of bricks, you know. I feel like I need to go outside in my t-shirt and shorts for about a week to get acclimated to it. But once the snow hits and once I get on my first ride, my body just knows to switch gears and get warm. So yeah, I'm ready. Northwood Snowmobile LSC. Thoughts on showing areas in green that are legal to ride off trail and red where you can't, to help trails from getting shut down and increase latest crossover crazy penalties. I think that's a really great idea on the maps on your GPS and on your gauges. Yeah, I think that's really smart. I think that if we could do that, it would be more likely that people would go find those green areas as opposed to saying, I don't know where they are, so I'm just going to go wherever I want. Yeah, actually, it's an idea we bounced around here years ago after doing a trip to Wawa and riding off trail there where it is legal. It was kind of like, hey, why don't we tell people where these areas are so they know where to go and send them there? You know, instead of saying don't ride off trail, just say you can ride off trail here. And there are some clubs around the U.S., certain areas that we're doing that. We're saying we have dedicated off trail riding areas. I know in Ontario we didn't. We talked about it, but we didn't, and I think it's a really smart idea. Multi-Stew 204. Technology is great, but I still need my Skidoo to smoke my buddies who ride the other brands. Technology will help, you know, turbo technology and E-Tech and EFI and all that stuff. That's all technology that will help you do that. But yes, there are many ways to make your Skidoo go a lot faster. Those are things that we don't really deal with a lot here on SnowTrax, but there are lots of them. There's lots of guys in the comments here who can definitely help you figure that out if that's what you're looking for. Milty Stew 204 again. We need a more powerful 600. Oh, you mean like a 650? Yeah, Skidoo needs a 650 so bad. I don't have any reason to, other than my intuition, I have no other reason to think that Skidoo is going to build a 650. They haven't told us anything, but I have to think something's coming that's bigger than a 600 simply because, you know, Polaris is doing it, and I got to think Arctic Cat's looking at it too. They can't let Polaris mow their grass for much longer. Does RXRS have rebound adjustment? I should know the answer to this. I'm looking at the Shox in my screen right now. No, there is no clicker on the bottom. It has their, is it 5-position clicker on the top? So it's not like it's a like infinite. It's not like 20 clicks. It's 3 or 5 on the top, which is, I really like that. That Skidoo has done that with their XRS packages, has gone to more of a, not a QS3, but it's like a QS3 in terms of simplifying adjustment. And here's why I like that. I'll tell you guys this because it happens all the time, and I tell a lot of people this. The number of times I'm out on the trail and I meet a guy, you know, we get talking on trailside somewhere. I'm always hanging out with people, getting their opinions and wondering how people are liking their sleds. And when somebody says, hey, you said this sled that I bought should ride great and mine doesn't. And when I go and look at it, the clickers are all set different. That happens like all the time because 20 clicks or 24 clicks of compression, high, low speed, rebound, whatever, it is very confusing. So when you throw on like a 5-click or a 3-click, soft, medium, firm, that is more than what most people need. That is enough for most hard riders to just go click, 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 and change the compression damping. There are lots of you guys out there, and I know this, that love to fiddle and tune and understand high and low speed and how they interact with each other and how they affect rebound, etc. But most people don't. And I think that's why I really like this. You know, I do like that there are still the highest end models that give you some of that finer tuning. But I think on an XRS model, which realistically isn't bought by guys who are going to hit big jumps, it's a performance trail rider sled. The 5 or 3 clicks, whatever it is, are more than enough, and I really like that. I would like to have rebound, though. I think that most people understand how rebound works, and having worked with Rebound on some different vehicles this past winter or summer, sorry, I really have started to appreciate more and more how much effect it really has, and how sometimes it's even more important than compression. And I think that probably if you're gonna have a high-end shock on a high-end sled, it should have a rebound adjustment. Just my thought. Is racing still relevant in an R&D sense? It seems like most of the tech coming out lately doesn't look to be coming from the race world. Race sleds don't use turbos or GPS. That's from Sled 519. Yeah, I mean, there's two different streams, right? There's the technology that they can't use on the racetrack, and then there's the durability and chassis handling, ride quality, things like that that are developed on track. There was a time in the 90s, early mid 2000s when racing was helping to develop better trail sleds, like time after time after time. Every year it was what we developed on the racetrack ended up on the trail and made the trail sleds better. But we've come to a point now where those two vehicles are starting to move further apart. I do still think, though, that testing sleds on a racetrack, testing technology on a racetrack, whatever it is really valuable. And I think that we are still seeing a lot of trickle-down effect from racing into our trail sleds. But I think it's a lot less than it was before. Much like, you know, when you look at street bikes, let's say, you know, just because you win MotoGP doesn't mean the technology on that MotoGP bike is going to make your street bike, is going to end up on your street bike, your personal bike. But there's a lot of technology that they develop there that is going to make your bike better. And I think it's the same with snowmobiling. Gordon McKay, I had the 7S, now I have a Blizzard. I don't miss too much from the 7S, but the most important thing I miss is the compass. Why is the compass not standard equipment on all sleds? That is funny you say that, because that is the first thing I shut off on a 7S. I don't really care what way I'm pointed, as long as I'm headed down the trail. So I guess it all depends on how you ride, and you know, obviously people have different preferences, but it's really interesting that you really value the compass. It seems to me like it would be a really easy thing to just include if you have a gauge. You know, I gotta think anything that has a GPS built in, anything knows which direction it's pointed. So if it has a GPS module, there should be somewhere in the top screen, like in my car, you know, where it's up in the top of the display, just a little thing telling me which direction I'm headed. So I don't know why they couldn't do that. Mike K, I'm looking forward to being able to see my riding group on the display. It is really nice. It really is nice. Yeah, I mean, being able to know just by a quick glance that your buddies are all still with you, especially at night, or if it's really blowing snow or snow dust, whatever, just being able to know that they're there without having to stop and turn around all the time, or to while you're riding, turn your head around or whatever, try and look through your tiny little mirror. Super helpful. I really like it too. Agawa Rentals. I'm not really sure what you mean by I think people sleep on Skidoo entry-level machines like 600 EFI, cheap and very little maintenance needed. I'm not sure what you mean by sleep on them, but I think they're really great machines. The 600 EFI is a really great snowmobile. I don't know why it's not a better seller, because it's a 600 EFI that, you know, goes fast and is comfortable and has all the modern amenities that you could possibly need to snowmobile. And it's not expensive, and I don't know why more people don't ride them, but we don't see very many of them around here. Jimmy Saf, why is it Polaris can't build a fuel pump without static discharge, but the other manufacturers don't seem to have an issue with it? Look, man, I got a lot of thoughts around that. I think that Polaris is, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't talk about this. I think they're super paranoid about anything to do with fire because they've had lawsuits. And anytime that fire is even a possibility, they just go bananas on it. You know, that whole static discharge thing, the scenario in which it was a problem was so narrow and so easy to avoid just by taking a few easy steps that it almost seemed like a joke to me. I mean, you know, it was, your tank had to be partially full of old gas that was 2 years old, and yeah, like all you had to do is top your sled up with fresh gas and it wouldn't happen. You know, it was anyway, I don't want to get into a whole lot of that because that's a whole different thing. I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to, but yeah, I don't know. It seemed weird. Joshua Reed. In my opinion, the next big step for Skidoo's 10.25 dash technology is no need for plugging in. Turn by turn is the last thing it can't do offline. Yes, that's exactly what I think too. It's great. The gauge is great, and I really wish they would just include the ability to load maps in the gauge. It seems like it's all there. It's all possible. It's just they haven't done it. I don't know why, but I don't know why, but it's definitely doable. Okay, Sell the Profit 66. Can you talk about how you like setting up your suspension and why you make the adjustments you make? Just recently got into tuning my rear suspension, but looking for advice on front adjustments. Okay, when you do what we do, where you have so many sleds every day and there's all different people riding them, they're constantly getting messed with, right? So when I go and ride, I might make adjustments, but when my brother goes or my dad goes, or if I put my wife on a sled or my daughter and I adjust it for her, so things are always being tweaked. But what I do and the way I look at things is this. First of all, I have a theory. If you are paying for travel, you should be using all the travel you're paying for, which means if you're not bottoming out on the biggest bumps, then you are wasting travel. You should, and anybody I've talked to who's a suspension person says, yes, you should bottom out on the largest bumps, the biggest ones. So when people try and set their suspensions to never bottom ever, 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 you are likely riding a sled that is way too stiff and rides like crap. Now, how much bottoming out you can handle or you can put up with is totally up to you. I can handle a lot more because I really like a soft ride in the medium to smaller size bumps. And if it means that on bigger bumps I'm bottoming more often, I can live with that. Unless I'm going to be like on a rough trail with the boys trying to get home before it gets dark and just not even touching the bottom of the bumps, then I'll go and tune things up a bit. But I start off with every sled we get here, and I turn everything to full soft. Compression and rebound. I set the ride height with the spring so it's proper for my weight, and then I start from there with everything at 0. First ride, hitting bumps. As I'm noticing that it's too soft here, too soft there, I'll bump things up. If I'm noticing the rebound just isn't responding the way I want, or if it's pogo-y in the back or whatever, then I add some rebound here and there. But I only go up by really small increments. When you're dealing with a Skidoo that only has 5 clicks, obviously you can only do so much. So start at full soft and then go up 1 click. And then if it's not enough, go up 2 clicks, and etc. But that's how we do everything here, is always start full soft and then work up to the point where you're like, okay, that's enough. It's like The Price is Right. Just enough without going over, right? But yeah, I talk to people all the time who are like, oh no, I don't want my sled to bottom ever. Well, then you've got an extra couple inches of travel you've never used. And, you know, that's travel you paid for, so you should be using it. If you have a reason never to bottom, like, you know, your back can't take it, that's one thing. But anytime I ride a person's sled who sets it up not to bottom ever, it is always so stiff on normal everyday bumps. And I think that just in general, snowmobiles come valved way too stiff from the factory. When I put it in this kind of perspective, you've got a snowmobile that I, at 245 pounds, ride at 4 clicks from full soft out of 20, or 6 clicks out of full soft from 20 clicks. When my wife, who's half my weight, gets on that sled and puts it to 0, it's still too stiff for her. Why is that? Why does that make any sense? Why are we not making sleds so that a guy like me has to bump it up to 3/4, right? My weight, I should be at the upper end of compression damping because of my extra weight working that suspension harder. But that's not the way they come. And when you look at sleds that don't have adjustable suspension, they are always too stiff, in my opinion, when you factor in a wider range of riders. I mean, if I was to buy my wife any sled, I would have to have it revalved for her because it would just always ride way too rough. And I think that's crazy. I think all suspensions should come valved down lower so that only the hardest core riders, only the hardest core riders should ever, ever, ever have anything set to full stiff. But I don't know anyone. I know you guys do. You ride in Tug Hill and places like that where it's crazy bumpy in the afternoons. But most people will never use full stiff on their suspensions, ever, ever. So if that's the case, then there's too stiff. You know what I mean? Let's see. SJW equipment. It's a good day. Just got home from Polaris dealer with a new to me switchback Assault 650. Thanks for helping me know about all the different machines. You're more than welcome, man. I think you made a great choice. I think you're going to really love that thing. And we had one around here, I think 2 years ago, and we put 1 billion miles on it. We really, really liked it. So way to go. And new to you is a good idea. You just saved a bunch of money. You don't pay the depreciation. That's cool too. Pro AV 603. As far as technology, I'd like to see a Pantera 7000 with power steering, Garmin display, active suspension, optional 20-inch track. That would be cool. The Garmin display I know has been designed, or the catalyst was designed to fit the Garmin display, whereas the older chassis is not designed for that. So I kind of doubt you're ever going to see that. But on the Pantera, it really does make a lot of sense. It's a touring sled, so having the extra features on there would be great. Active suspension would be cool. Etiquette doesn't have active suspension. They have electronically adjustable suspension, but it's not active. 20-inch track. There are lots of people out there who like that. You're in Bearcat territory, but I mean, obviously I know it's a totally different vehicle, so that's totally different. Andrew Lawson, what do I think about Ruski Evo wheel kits to save your carbides? We've tested a bunch of them, and I see how where the benefits come from. But for us, we do ride a bit of road, but it's never enough to really be concerned about wearing out your carbides. If you're in a place where maybe certain times of the year, or maybe just based on where you are, that you're going to have to run a lot of roads to get to trails, or your trails go down a lot of roads, then yeah, I think there's a benefit to them. I'm not sure which was the last version that we tested, but we did have some problems with them. So I would say if you're going to pick a wheel kit for your skis, just make sure that it's durable and it's going to last and it's tough, because obviously they're going to take a beating, and they need to be super tough. You are adding a lot of unsprung weight to the front of your sled, so it is going to affect your ride quality too. So just realize that. Dave Edmondson, do you remember or know John Mazenberg? Absolutely. John was a great guy and a very good friend. He actually filmed SnowTrax long before I ever started with SnowTrax out of our shop here a number of times. He would bring the SnowTrax crew here, and at the time this was the SuperTrax World Headquarters, and he filmed stuff out of here a lot actually. And he was a good friend and very, very sad when he passed away. I miss John. He was a great big personality and a really great guy. And the world is not a better place because he's not in it. It was definitely better when he was here. So definitely missed. And we always talk about John around here at SnowTrax. We do. We've always tried as well to carry on a legacy that we think John would be proud of. As far as the way we produce shows and the things that we do here, we would want John to look down and see what we're doing and be proud of us. So I hope he is. Let's see. We're talking about racing. Seller Profit 66. Can you explain compression damping and what that does to your sled? Trying to understand the concept a little better. Compression damping is the easy one. So inside your shock, you have oil. And as the piston moves up and down, oil passes through the piston, right? And the size of the hole in the piston is what causes restriction as the shock shaft pushes the piston inside the shock body up and down. This is really probably inappropriate, but anyway, as it pushes that piston up and down, the holes inside the piston itself are what allow more or less oil to pass through, or oil to pass through at higher or lower speeds. All compression damping does is make those holes bigger or smaller. So if you want it to be smoother, you open those holes up so the oil can flow through easier, and then that shock will compress faster when it hits a bump. If you want it to not compress so fast when it hits a bump and resist that bottoming, then you make those holes smaller. That's literally all that it does. And rebound, to put it the most simple way possible, is essentially the same thing in reverse. Slowing your rebound, slowing the speed at which the shock shaft extends out of the shock, and it does it in a very similar way at the most basic level. There's a lot more tech to it than that. And there's a lot of other different concepts, needles and internal bypass and all this kind of stuff, all kinds of extra things. But essentially that's what compression damping does and how it works. Northwood Snowmobile LSC, do you happen to see any mid-season releases coming out like in the past? There have been mid-season releases that we have had no inkling of, just blown us away. Oh my goodness, where did this even come from? I think this year, I just don't really think this year's a year for any major things coming from Skidoo and Polaris. I think probably what we've seen is what we're going to get. unless Skidoo does have a secret 650 somewhere that they didn't tell us about, and they're going to come out with a limited build 650 just to knock everybody's socks off. That's the only thing I see. Again, I don't have any reason to think they're going to, but that would be the only one I would see. Arctic Cat, I think maybe could, because they are working really hard to do some updates to the stuff that they had when they bought these new guys bought the company. There may be some things that they had in the pipe that wasn't being released, but now they want to. But I don't know. I love it when there's mid-season releases. I think it's so much fun. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. Jimmy G, thoughts about having your Shox revalve for your weight and riding style? If you're going to keep your sled and you're going to ride it for a while, yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, especially if you're outside those averages, if you're a big guy, then you almost have to do that. And again, if you're a really small, light person, then you almost have to do it. Otherwise, you're getting a poor ride quality, because realistically, especially when you're dealing with a shock that's not adjustable, manufacturers have to pick a middle ground and say, okay, we're gonna valve this shock for this weight of rider, and it'll work for guys a little bit lighter and guys a little bit heavier, or girls, and generally speaking, it's going to work for this weight of rider. If you are way outside that zone, then you will have to revalve your shocks or buy a shock that is adjustable. But even with adjustable shocks, as we talked about earlier, if the valving zone in the shock is set too high or too low, then you may never be able to get the compression damping low enough for your weight. So you may have to have it revalved. And likewise, if it's not high enough because of your weight or you're super aggressive or whatever it is, you may have to have that have your shock revalved for stiffer compression damping. So yeah, I think you should have your shocks revalved for your weight and riding style if you're outside of that general norm, or if you find you're running your clickers at one extreme or the other all the time. It's probably time to have a look at that at least, because really, if you think about it, when you're riding a snowmobile, the perfect situation would be for you to have your clickers right in the middle. So if you have 20 clicks, you would be at 10. That would be perfect, because now you can get stiffer if you need to or softer if you need to. But if you're riding with your clickers at 2 or out of 20 at 18, you have no adjustment really at the outer ends of that scale. So if you do want it to get more or less, depending on where you're at, you have no ability to do that. So I think that's when you'd want to look at having them revalved. Chris Daniels, isn't the red clicker on the sled behind you 70% compression and 30% rebound, or 80-20? See, that's what I don't know. I haven't looked into that. Again, it's because I'm still doing ATV stuff. I haven't sat down and really looked at the spec sheets and really dug into that kind of stuff yet. But we are getting there. We are almost done with dirt tracks, and then my whole life will revolve around snowmobiles from now on. So yeah, I haven't looked into that. If you confirm that, let me know. I would appreciate you helping me out with that information. But what I do know is that oftentimes on higher end shocks that only have compression, it will have an effect on rebound as well. So I do know that, and that's very likely that this shock is set that way. Sportsman 1776, a compilation video of all Mark's one-liners during his walk-around videos would be beneficial to humanity. That would be good, wouldn't it? And he has a lot of them. Man, like you should sit around dinner with that guy, because it's not just on snowmobile walk-arounds. It is every day, all day, he is coming up with these one-liners. And as his son, who grew up with it my entire life, there was a whole lot of like forehead moments, like, oh my gosh, why are you saying this? Or in front of my friends. But the truth is, everybody thought it was hilarious. It was just me because I was his son. But yes, he has a ton of one-liners. And I do think maybe a tribute to Mark after his retirement with a little demo reel might be kind of funny to give him the proper send-off that he totally deserves, because, he's been awesome in this industry for so long. Devin, 2 feet of snow in Western Labrador right now. Get on it, man. Put some miles on. Chad Gale, 600s were the thing back in the late 90s and early 2000s. Now people want 850s and 4-stroke sleds. 600s are like the 440s and 500s in the early 90s. Isn't that funny how that works? I have this term I use. I call it CC creep. We saw it in ATVs, definitely in the 2000s, where somebody would produce a 500, and then another person would produce a 525, and then somebody would come out with a 550, and then it was like, oh, well, we'll just bump to 600, and then it was like 650, and then we went to 700, and all of a sudden now we're at 800, and it was like as people wanted to beat the other guy, they just kept adding CCs, And it's CC creep. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until finally we were at like 850s, 1000s. How much bigger do you want to go? Which is why I always think it's cooler when you can take the same CCs and beat the other guys. Now, what I will say, because everybody's going to be like, Polaris 650, and you can say that, Skidoo 850 when they came out with it. But what I will say is that the 650 is a more usable engine package than the 600 is. I don't know if that would be from everybody, but the Polaris 650 is way more usable than their 600. It's not about being bigger. It's about being more effective and better. The power is better and it's more usable. So I think in that case, it's good. But there's been other people who said, well, what if Skidoo comes out with a 670? Well, then what if Arctic comes out with a 700? Is that going to happen again where we just keep one-upping each other with CCs? There has to be some sort of like, we're going to keep it here just to make that class exist. Otherwise, the class disappears and we start the cycle all over again. Mike Skidmore, back when I still weighed 160, I had to put a heavier spring on my Yamaha Attack, as many suggested on Yamaha Talk. I put softer springs front and rear on the Yamaha YZ400F for trail riding. You put heavier springs on your Attack. Man, I thought they rode really stiff. Northwood Snowmobiling. Thoughts on if we would see a hybrid sled mass-produced before an all-electric, allowing people to switch to gas? There is a reason I don't think that's going to happen. And it's pretty straightforward. If you have a gas-powered sled with a gas tank full of fuel, there is no room for an electric power system. Now, if you want to have a single-cylinder engine shoved in the corner of the engine bay with an electric engine beside it and then a tiny little fuel tank with a great big battery, then okay. But that's not realistic given the space. When you look at a Taiga, excuse me, and you see how much space is used up for the battery to go like just over 100 kilometers, it's ridiculous. So no, I don't think it's even possible to do that without going way outside the weight limits of what a snowmobile should be. Cars are different, right? Because they roll on wheels and they can be an unlimited size. But for snowmobiles, we have some size things to work on. D Downs, we miss you at the Novi Snow Show. Man, I miss going to the Novi Show. That was a thing for my family every year. That was like an event that we all did, and I really miss it. But our seasons now are so incredibly busy that time of year that we cannot take the time to do it, and I really feel bad. We go to Heydays every year and walk around for a couple days, and that's the only thing we can do because it fits into a time in our schedule and we have time to do it. Dan Harper, will e-technology soon be old technology? I don't think so. I think e-technology will be around for a while. It's what version of e-tech technology and what comes next for e-tech. Obviously, e-tech has been around for a long time now, and it hasn't really changed that much. It's been getting better and better with tuning and small changes. Is there like a Gen 2 e-tech out there that's going to be different in how it functions but do the same thing? No idea. But I will say that e-tech, and I guess I need to be more specific, direct injection technology, because that's what e-tech is direct injection technology is going to become bigger and more of it. And it's going to have to, as emissions controls become more strict, these other manufacturers are going to have to start looking into that technology if they want to keep building two-strokes. And it's the world we live in. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. It's necessary technology today. Chris Daniels, thanks for saying damping and not dampening. There's nothing wet about it. I hope there's not. I have a lot of pet peeves, and that's one of mine. The other pet peeve I have is when people say anyways with an S. Like, it doesn't have an S on it. It's anyway, but we all have our pet peeves. But damping and dampening is one that always gets me too. Drives me nuts. But you know what? As long as I understand what people are saying, I'm not going to give them a hard time for it. Dax Rushlow. I guess if you have ridden sleds since 1983, you just deal with the trail or not so trail. Love the newer technology, though, now that I'm getting older. So I guess what you're saying is you just deal with how the trail is, whether it's good or bad. I mean, I grew up on 80s and early 90s, sleds too. And you're right. There was a time when technology was only, suspension technology was only so good. And if it was rough, it was just rough. And you just rode rough trails. Now we all have such high expectations. Like, oh, it's too bumpy. Well, I mean, it is snow. Chad Gale, I live in Minnesota. Wawa has always piqued my interest. Is it worth to travel from Minnesota? I ride trail, backcountry, mountains. Yeah, if you ride both, then yeah. Now, I'm not sure what's still up there. The guy who was doing the backcountry tours, I don't know if he's still doing it, but they have large areas out there that are totally open to backcountry riding, and they're pretty impressive, and they do get a lot of snow up there. So it's definitely worth it. The trails are wicked up there too, fast, wide, just really, really cool trails if you like to ride long distances. So that's a great place to go. Kenny McGraw, do you guys ever come to ride New Brunswick? We have great trails, good grooming, great signage, and no speed limits. We are coming this winter, my friend. Generally speaking, we only go to places where people want us. Now, what I mean by that is where tourism destinations want us. I'm sure, as you can imagine, traveling all over the place costs a lot of money, and we can't just go to places without there being some level of support there. So New Brunswick used to be a big supporter of SnowTrax, and we did do a bunch of trips there quite a few years ago. They have just come back on board now, and we will be traveling to New Brunswick again this year. I always tell people, if you want us to come to ride your area, get a hold of your tourism region and tell them that you want SnowTrax to come there and to get their checkbooks out. And it's not because we're better than everybody else, but it's because we got to be able to afford to do these things. And if there's a place over there who's going to pay us to come ride their trails and do a story, and this place isn't, then we're probably going to go there. And I think everybody on this program would do the same thing. And it's not, we are all capitalist pigs, but it's not because of that. It's just because business, and it makes sense. But I do love riding all different areas, and I can't wait to ride New Brunswick again. It's been a while. David Edmonston, you guys do an amazing job. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. What sleds does your money buy? For trails or a little bit of open ice, I assume you mean lake running. If I was going to ride just trails and lakes, which is what I do ride where I'm from, I'm like an XRS, XCR, Rave. I don't mind the backcountry with the wide front end or the Assault. Those sleds are perfect for what we do around here. But a typical trail sled, I ride with a guy, one of my best friends. He'll be on the show this winter, actually. Stefan, he rides a 650 XCR, and we most of the time have big sleds. But if I have to ride a 650 or 600, I have no problem with that. You are holding it wide open a little longer, and you're using more gas on the lakes. But other than that, yeah, engine size is all about preference. If you're going to be with a group of guys who have 850s, then you're probably going to want an 850 just so you can keep up and not feel like you're wide open all the time. But if you can convince all your riding buddies to stick to 600, 650s, then you can save a little bit of money and have just as much fun. So, yeah. You guys ever ride in Michigan? I did years ago. I rode in the UP. This is going back a long, long way. But the UP doesn't advertise at all. They're very limited in wanting even to bring media there to ride. And I don't know what that's all about, whether it's Michigan, the government of Michigan doesn't want to do that, or if it's tourism or what it is. But we have never, since that one time, we have never seen any interest from Michigan to have us come ride there. And that's really sad because I really liked riding the UP. It was a lot of fun. Vincent Andrioli, I'm a coffee nut, gotta have it when getting ready to ride. Always gets cold. How is the Skidoo mug by Yeti? It is a Yeti mug that says Skidoo, so if a Yeti mug is good, it's good. But actually, Skidoo didn't give me this for these live streams. They gave me the shirt, but this was given to me years ago by Skidoo at an intro sometime, and it's my go-to mug. I really like it. Yeah, I guess if I was doing a Polaris live stream, I couldn't use it. But yeah, there you go. I'm glad you noticed it. I was doing it so somebody would notice, and finally you did. Declan Delaney, is the P-Tech a bad motor? No, PowerTech motor's great. It's just not an E-Tech. So yeah, it is old technology, but it's still perfectly good technology. They don't last as long as E-Techs do, but it is a very good motor. We put a lot of miles on PowerTech motors over the years. Let's see. Joshua Reed, I guess we need an episode about suspension tuning. That is something that I've been pushing for a long time. I would love to do like a 10-minute or 15-minute segment with, say, bring in some guys from Fox, whoever, it doesn't matter, from Elka or whatever, even one of the manufacturers. But it would be nice to keep it, neutral. and just have them explain to us, bring some cutaways and show us how it works and describe for us what each piece does. I would love that, and I've been pushing for that. So hopefully, we've been working on trying to get Fox to come on board with the show. And if we did, then I would love for that to be a segment we do. And I know that it would be so helpful for everybody else. And it could potentially at some point be like a web-only kind of thing that we do. That's one thing about TV that you guys need to kind of understand and just so you know how things work. TV's not like a magazine where we can just add a page, right? If you have more advertisers and you want to do more stories, you just print another page, and it can kind of go unlimited in that way. But TV, we only have so many minutes and we only have so many episodes. So you can't buy a single episode of TV on a network. You have to buy them in blocks of 13. So if we want to add, say we do 13 episodes of SnowTrax, if we want to add another one, we got to buy 13 more. And with the season the way it is, the length of the season, that's not feasible. That's not doable at all. So yeah, we get things sometimes packed in with all kinds of great information, and there's not room to do all the stories we want to do. But lots of times we keep them on an idea board and we use them, or bring them in next year. That one's been on an idea board for a while, mostly because we'd love to have a sponsor for it. And if we're going to use an expert from a shock company, it'd be nice if we're going to give them coverage for them to help us out with that segment. So we'll see down the road someday. I'd love to do that though. Sell the Profit 66. It's preseason maintenance time. Can you give us a few must-dos for preseason maintenance? Well, if we learned anything from Polaris, top your tank up before you go to start your sled, I would say, is probably number one. Yeah, it depends on how you stored your sled. That's a big one, right? Like if you stored your sled properly, and we did do a series on that a while ago about how to store your sled and then, winterizing and then summarizing. I don't know. If you did it properly, then there is a checklist, right? You're going to unhook your battery or take your battery out and put it back in, and you're going to wipe the grease or the spray that you've put on your metal parts to stop rust and corrosion. You're going to wipe that off, or you're going to tighten your track because you're supposed to loosen your track for storage. So you should probably go back and tighten your track, and just all those kind of things that you really need to do. If you did put some like engine stabilizer spray or storage spray in your cylinders, you're probably going to want to take the plugs out, run it a bit to get some of that out, put the plugs back in, fire it up, make sure it's running, and then probably take your plugs out and clean them and put them back in. So yeah, there's stuff like that you probably should look at doing. But again, it all matters how you did your summarization of your sled. If you just literally like put some stable in the gas and put it in the garage, then probably you should take it to your dealer so they can make sure nothing has gone wrong over the summer. Let's see here. Wow, you guys are asking a lot of questions this time. It's awesome. Mike Skidmore, many street bikes have rebound valving in one fork and compression valving in the other fork. That's right. Even my mountain bike has compression damping and rebound in one side and then the air spring in the other. I always thought that was weird. Hayden Richard P. We don't need 80 plus horsepower to go snowmobiling. There is too much horsepower. You know what? I mean, it depends on who you are and how you ride. Can you ride a snowmobile with 50 horsepower all day, everywhere? Yeah, except the mountains. But yeah, you can, totally. Is it more fun to ride a sled with 100 horsepower, 150 or 180? Yeah, definitely is if you're in the lakes. If you're riding trails, if you're riding tight trails, then I totally agree that an 850 or a turbo is kind of pointless. Like, not kind of, like is literally pointless. But a 600, 650 is much better there. But even a 650 these days makes 140 plus, and a 600 makes in the 125 to 30 range. So like an 80 plus horsepower snowmobile these days is like a 500. And you're not wrong that you can ride it everywhere and have a good time. But if you're running in certain areas, UP of Michigan, Quebec area, Northern Ontario, Lake Country where I live, that extra horsepower is good. And I guess there could be an argument made that having more horsepower is a little bit safer if you end up in some slush, or if you end up, in a really bad situation where something went totally wrong and you're on open water and you need to like get to shore. So yeah, I mean, there's arguments both ways. Northwood Snowmobiling. I personally believe the involvement of family in SnowTrax and DuraTrax is the thing that sets your shows apart from the others. This is what caused me to buy a 650 Adventure and start looking at side-by-sides. Oh, that's really cool, man. Thank you. I actually, We get a lot of comments about our business and about how crazy it is that we are a family business and we don't kill each other. But we've been a family business for a long time, since the beginning. You know, my dad and my uncle Kent started SuperTrax magazine, and my first job was writing for SuperTrax magazine, and AJ's first job was as well. And my cousins, we all work together. We don't want to kill each other, but it works for us because of the way we do it. And it's the thing I like about my business the most, is that my partners are my cousins and my brother, and I really like them. Like I don't just have to work with them. It's not just family, but I like hanging out with them. We did an episode of Dirt Tracks this year. We went to Hatfield McCoy, just the four of us, and rode around and spent some time in Hatfield McCoy together, and it was so much fun. I grew up with these guys. The lake that we're on right now, our office is on a lake beside my parents' house. My uncle's house is right next door. Kent's house is right next door, and you know, we all grew up, the whole group of us, on this lake as kids, hanging out together as we grew up. I looked up to Mike and Matt when I was just a little squirt. Like, they were my cool older cousins, and now we all hang out together. So it's a family business through and through, and I love it that way, and it means a lot to me that it is. I'm sorry that I'm skipping a lot of your questions, but there's just not enough time. Slee Stack, what's your best advice on how I can get my girlfriend back? Buy a 6 sled and do donuts on the lake. I hear girls love that. Or like, take your car and do burnouts in a parking lot. That would, I mean, 100%. I saw on YouTube that's what girls like. So do that. Bring back the triples. Every week somebody's on the triples. Rob Albro, what do you think of the OFSC closing trails this year? Parry Sound is getting it pretty hard. I think some of it's the OFSC, and I think some of it's our government. Until the day when our government legislates that you absolutely cannot sue somebody if you're on their property and it has a trail. Like, let's say a landowner says, okay, I'm going to allow the OFSC to put a trail across my property. Until the day when doing that makes you completely insulated from liability, like 100%, like it's against the law, people are going to keep pulling their trails because liability is getting ridiculous when you can sue for literally anything, whether it's your fault or not. So Hatfield McCoy does this. If you are on a Hatfield McCoy trail, or if you're on the property that a Hatfield McCoy trail is on, you are legally unallowed to sue if you get into a problem. And more places are saying, hey, come put trails on our property. That's why Hatfield McCoy is expanding so fast. And look into it if you're not an ATVer. It's pretty amazing. But the problem right now is that you sign your trail permit and it has a liability attached to it. You can sign a waiver and say, I understand that what I'm doing, has a level of risk to it. But then when you go do something dumb, like take off in a field off the trail and hit a rock and hurt yourself, you sue the landowner. And so landowners say, well, I don't want that. I'm just going to close the trail. And I don't honestly blame them in a lot of cases. It sucks, but I don't totally blame them. So our government needs to step in and fix this. Do I have any confidence it's going to happen? No, but that's actually what happened in Parry Sound. It was one landowner closed a piece of trail, and now you can't get to the town of Parry Sound. That's really sad. Let's see. Mike H, you can ride the UP without being paid. I go all the time, never got a penny. If I had 5 minutes in the winter to go do that, I would. I honestly would. That's about a 10-hour drive. No, it's almost 12 hours for us. But, I travel a lot in the winter. And so when I'm at home, I want to ride with my daughters. I want to ride with my wife. I want to ride with my dad. So it's not feasible for me to do all those things. But I agree with you. I would love to be able to go and ride anywhere I want. And one day when I'm, at that age where I can just enjoy riding, I don't know, I'll probably do this till I die. But yeah, I'm going to travel to all those different places. My cousin Matt, he's been watching the live stream, and he just said, I like hanging out with you too, buddy. Great job. He's one of my partners. Yeah, and it means a lot that he sends that because we like each other and we hang out. Let's see. Northwood Snowmobiling. Thoughts on the 900 Ace versus the S4? It's such a sad one to do. Like, it's really hard because the 900 Ace and the S4 both make the same horsepower. The 900 Ace engine was built for a snowmobile, so it is like it fits in the snowmobile properly. But then you've got an S4 that's an ATV engine that's been fit into a sled, but it's in the Matrix chassis, which is the superior handling sled. So I would say that all in all, I think the 900 Ace is better because it is a snowmobile engine in a snowmobile. And that is, I've said this, I think I said this last week and maybe the week before too. If you want to build a 4-stroke snowmobile that's any good, you have to build the engine to fit in the sled, not the other way around. It has to be a purpose-built motor. We've learned that from Skidoo, that the more purpose-built the motor is, the better that 4-stroke snowmobile is. And that's why they're making some of the best 4-stroke snowmobiles. Not some of, they are making the best 4-stroke snowmobiles in the industry right now because they design motors for snowmobiles. So that's what I think Polaris needs to do with the S4. They need to stop using ATV engines. They need to put a proper snowmobile engine into the Matrix chassis. They need to come out with multiple variants like Skidoo did with a 90 horsepower, 110 horsepower, and then 160 horsepower would be great. So yeah, that's what I think. But if as far as the overall sled goes, the S4 is very limited in the models you can get it in. The 900 Ace comes in so many different models. So I think it is the superior one, though I do actually like riding the S4, and I actually kind of like how it sounds better. It almost sounds like a V-twin, even though it's a parallel twin, but it has a really cool raspy sound to it that I actually really like. Yeah, I wouldn't ride a 90 horsepower sled. I would if somebody gave it to me, and if it was in the yard, that's all that was left, I'd happily ride it. But if I was buying a sled, I'd want a little more horsepower. And the nice thing about the Ace is that, you know, you can use the same engine with a turbo and get a little bit more horsepower, or you can use the same engine with a turbo and get a lot more horsepower. So it has multiple variants, whereas with Polaris, the S4 is the S4 is the S4. It's the only one model. Jamie, Wisconsin, beer drinkers inhabit the trails. There's been a couple comments about drinking, and I just want to put it out there, and I'm not bashful, and I'm not going to shy away from it. Nobody, and I mean nobody, should be drinking and riding at all. And I'm sorry to those guys who like to go out on the trail on a weekend and go to a restaurant and have a beer while they're riding, but just don't have the beer. Just don't. Even if you have one and you're perfectly fine and it doesn't affect you at all, if you get into an accident and people can smell it on you, they immediately assume that it's alcohol that's caused the problem. It is not worth it. Even if you're fine, it's just not worth it. That culture of drinking and riding needs to die. We have a zero tolerance here at SnowTrax. We've been on travel stories before where people have come to ride with us and have wanted to drink while we're out at restaurants or whatever and got a ride home. And we basically just said, like, if you do, you have to ride on your own because we're not riding with you. So yeah, I know that probably offends some people. And to be honest, I don't care. It is the number one, statistically, it's the number one thing that kills people is drinking and riding. So don't drink and ride. There's my public service announcement for the day. Let's see. Brad Ross, finally on the chat. Welcome, buddy. MV33, just got my XRS 850 Turbo Comp on Saturday. I'm so excited. I bet. Have you been sitting on it in your garage? Have you been like putting your gear on and like going ram, ram, ram in the garage, leaning off the side, getting your muscles worked in? I'm not going to lie, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I did it on this sled. I literally like came down when we first got it, was in the garage, and I was sitting on it and like standing up and kind of closing my eyes and imagining what it was going to be like to ride. I think we're all messed up, and I don't think it's a problem. I think we're good. Joshua Reed, sometimes I just post comments on here because I want Skidoo, or Skidoo is listening and you want them to hear your suggestions. You're right, they do listen. And then we've got feedback from our friends at Skidoo about how they have enjoyed how this whole thing has been going and they really liked it. And we've actually been sending some of your comments to them, so they can see how you guys are enjoying this. But yeah, they do listen. Actually, I will say this, Skidoo does listen. A big part of Skidoo's development process is taking into account what they've heard from their customers. That is a fact. Now, sometimes it might not seem like that because they're not doing something that a lot of customers have asked for. But lots of times the reason for that is because it either can't be done in a way that Skidoo is comfortable with, or because it takes time to do it. So it seems like they're not doing it, but really they are. It just the validation process is a very long one. So they do listen, and that is a great thing. Now, I'm not going to say that Polaris and Arctic Cat don't. They do too. They all listen. It's just sometimes there's more value put on customer feedback than others. And I think Skidoo puts a lot of value on customer feedback. James Dunn, coming from a 1200cc Skidoo, time to upgrade. Would love the sled behind you, but 10K is the budget. What are you buying? Mostly trail riding. I mean, if you're buying new, yeah, you're very limited. If you're buying used, you're not limited at all. There's a lot of great sleds out there for 10K. If you're looking in that 5-year-old bracket, if you're looking 5 years old, you want to stick with 4-stroke, then yeah, I think that, you know, any Skidoo Ace engine is going to be great. I think that if you're buying 5 years old, you know, you can look at some of the Arctic Cats or the Yamahas, the Vipers. You know, those are great sleds. They'll last forever, and they are really good sleds. So yeah, I think if you're sticking 4-stroke and you got 10K, there's a lot of options out there for you right now. If you're trail riding, just stick to a trail sled. Like really, don't worry about crossover. Don't worry about long tracks. Don't worry about that stuff. If you're just going to ride trails, then buy a sled with a 121 to 136 track. I'd prefer 136, and get something that fits you that you're happy with. You know, trail sleds these days, the reality is all of them are really good, and even going back 5 years, they're still really good. Is that sled better? Sure. But it's 4 times more expensive, or not 4 times more expensive. You know what I mean? It's way more expensive. So if you're sticking to a budget, just realize that, and I mean this totally sincerely, most sleds from the past 5 years are phenomenal snowmobiles. We get to be super picky because of what I do for a living. But the reality is, if you took almost any sled from the last 5 years, I would be totally happy if somebody handed it to me and said, that's the only sled you get to ride for the next 4 years. I'd be like, sweet, it's a great sled. You know, really, that's the truth. Jack Cliff, have you ever rode Wawa, Ontario? Yeah, I have multiple times actually. I've done the snow train tour. I've ridden back from Wawa to Sioux through halfway. I've ridden Wawa and done the off-trail stuff. So yeah, I've ridden Wawa a lot. Haven't been up there in a while, but I have ridden there quite a bit. Let's see. Jody Turcott, you and your brother seem to prefer 2 strokes over the 900 turbo. So is it basically because of weight? It's not just weight. They are heavier, but it's surprising how not heavier they are. Yes, they're heavier, but it's not dramatic. It's not drastic. It's not so much that you can't live with it. I think it's maybe more of what the weight does to the sled because of where it is, and it's the power delivery. I like a lighter, snappier 2-stroke. I don't not like riding 4-strokes, especially the new ones that are really, really good. But my preference is a 2-stroke. And I'll just, it's weight. I'm trying to skirt it and trying to come up with other reasons why. But the reality is I do like the lighter sled. I like it a lot. I like how it feels. I like the snappiness of a 2-stroke, which is affected by weight of a sled. I like that they spin up fast. You know, I like that they make really good bottom end power. I just like all of that stuff. So yeah, I am a 2-stroke guy. Doesn't mean I don't like riding 4-strokes. It just means if you put a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke in front of me and said, which one are you going to ride? You can choose either. I would choose the 2-stroke. Thank you, Canadian Natural. I'm glad somebody agrees with me. Frank Koshalak, is there anything better than talking snowmobiles in the middle of November? Love the live platform. There isn't, man. There really isn't. I love ATVs and side-by-sides, but there's something about talking to snowmobilers. We are a different breed, just entirely different from any other sport out there, literally any other sport. We have more passion for what we do, and we have to because it's not very comfortable when it's minus 40 out to go snowmobiling, and yet we do it, and people think we're nuts. You know, it's not an easy sport to do when you got to have a place to ride and a permit and all the clothing that works right and a sled and keep it running and traveling to different spots. It's not easy to be a snowmobiler. And so I think that's why as a group, we are much tighter connected to each other. I love in the past few years, past 10 years, that a lot of the brand rivalries have gone away. It doesn't matter to people anymore what you ride. We'll rib each other for sure. I won't, but you guys will rib each other about what you ride. But at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't matter as long as we're riding, and that's what I think most people feel these days. I remember back in the old days, like, you know, if you rode with a pack of Polaris guys, you had to ride a Polaris, or it was like you were an outcast and they didn't want to ride with you. Now it's totally different. Nobody cares what you ride as long as you're riding, and we just want to ride as a group. That's the way it works. So I really, really love that about this sport. It's what I always say this. My favorite thing about what I do for a living is that I get to meet people and get to talk to you guys. And that is truly what I love to do most, especially when I'm out on the trails, standing around a pit stop somewhere, whatever. People come over and talk to us, or I'll see a sled that I think is cool, go over and talk to somebody, ask them questions about it. I absolutely love that. So yeah, I agree. Rick Oulette, how does Dynamics Pro CC compare to standard R Motion? That's a really good question. We've actually talked a lot about that internally around here. My dad and I have spent a lot of time talking about it. I think Dynamics Pro CC brings the Pro CC almost up to the standard of an R Motion in terms of ride quality. What it does more, though, is make the Polaris sled handle even better than it already does. Does it ride as good as an R Motion? Still no. R Motion is still the best. There's nobody who is building a rear skid that rides as good as an R Motion, or has as wide a range of riding scenarios that it can handle. You know, small bumps, big bumps, huge bumps, stutter bumps, you name it. It just handles everything. Anti-bottoming, it just is amazing. But the Dynamics does help Pro CC come within a hair's breadth of it. So yeah, I think that, but Pro CC or Dynamics makes a Polaris handle even better than it already does, which is really why I would buy Dynamics. It wouldn't necessarily be for the ride quality, it would be for the handling. Andrew Hill, do the manufacturers allocate money for legislation to keep open or even open new trails? Feels like a constant theme of trails being closed for the recreation is slowly dying. Yes, they do. They have a whole, it's like a whole group. It's a whole thing that they support. The manufacturers all support it. And it is a lobbying group for snowmobiling. Now, I don't know a lot about it. My dad knows tons about it because he was heavily involved in the clubs, heavily involved in the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Clubs, and knows all the guys from all the other clubs. It's something that I'm sort of slowly working my way into to get to know some of that stuff. But yeah, there is definitely groups that are supported by the manufacturers that do that. Some of the manufacturers themselves will support other groups or have their own groups as well that advocate on behalf of snowmobilers. Problem is right now that there's so much area to cover and not enough money to cover it all, you know. Also, as I spoke to before, you can go to the government and you can say, hey, we need to have more clubs open, or more trails open, sorry. But until the government does something about making people feel comfortable having trails on their private property, nothing's going to change, because you can't go and tell a person, hey, we want you to open the trail on your private property if they're afraid of being sued. They have every right to be afraid of being sued, because people these days don't take responsibility for their own actions, and they do something stupid and they sue everybody to try and get some money out of it instead of just saying, whoops, I made a mistake. And that's what's ruining everything for everybody. Back in the old days, nobody did that. When you were out riding, you know, your sled in a field somewhere and you hit a rock, generally what I would have done is like bundled up all the parts and tried to run home fast so nobody caught me, but and not say anything about it. But now it's like, oh man, I hit a rock in that field. The homeowner, I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue the club. I'm going to sue the groomer operator. I'm going to sue the county. You know, I'm going to sue God for putting snow on the ground. Like, everybody sues everybody to try and get a buck, and it's really sad what it's done to our sport. If you can tell I'm passionate about this, it's because I really am. MV33, I literally just open the shop door and stare at it. Pictures don't do it justice. You're right. You're right, it doesn't. We actually have 5 skidoos on site right now. I haven't allowed myself to go look at the other 4 because I know I'll get too excited. Sunset Trail Rider, I really wish Skidoo would allow you to choose a color from their entire lineup when spring ordering a sled instead of just 2 color options for each model. I agree with you. We've talked a lot about that why can't we have more options? Polaris does a great job of that, of giving you a lot of options for their sleds. Skidoo has always stuck to just like black and then a color pretty much across the board. But there are so many cool colors they have in other parts of the lineup that would be so great if I could say I want my MXZX in this color that I see on the Grand Touring or vice versa. And I don't know that it would be that hard to do. I don't know why Skidoo hasn't done it, but I think that would be sort of, if you want to take Skidoo spring order to the next level, that is the next level, is giving people more customization. Something Polaris did, they went way down the road with color customization. You could pretty much make every part of your sled a different color if you wanted to. They pulled back on that a little bit because it was just too much, but they still give you a lot of options, and Skidoo could do a better job with that, I think. Wesley Morberg, what are your thoughts on a sled deck versus an enclosed trailer? I have 1 ton, but mostly do day trips when riding, which are within 200 miles of home. So there are pretty obvious differences between the two. A sled deck is super convenient. You can park anywhere. You can back into any space. If your unloading zone is really tight, a sled deck is amazing. They're not as hard to use as people think they are, as long as you do it right. They are kind of scary to back off of, but as long as you do it right, there's not really a big issue. They do use up your box, though. The new Marlon decks have a seal kit now, so even though the posts go down into your box, it seals around the bottom of the deck, so you can still put stuff under there and it won't get soaked. With that said, on your sled deck, unless you're going to run a cover, which is always a gamble that it's going to get ripped or blow off, your sled's going to get dirty on any highway. You're just going to get road grime from the vehicles in front of you. A trailer, an enclosed trailer, is obviously harder to back up, harder to park, easier to load, and your sled stays clean. And, well, no, I guess from a security standpoint, it's pretty hard to steal a sled off a sled deck if you don't have access to the ramp. So maybe it's safer on a sled deck. I don't know. But overall, we've used sled decks and we have trailers. We have both. We use them both for different times depending on what we're doing. If AJ and I are just going to go up with a friend and ride some off-trail stuff on a hydroline somewhere, we'll throw 2 sleds on the sled deck and go. If we're going to go like riding with the family, I always use an enclosed trailer, so it's just easier that way. But yeah, I think there's definitely benefits to both, and you just have to decide, do the benefits outweigh the negatives for you on either one? Which one do the benefits most benefit you and which one do the negatives most take away from what you're doing? Vincent Andrioli, hi from Maine. We enjoy everything you guys do. Come ride here. Thank you very much. And I rode in Maine couple years. No, it was a lot of years ago now. We did a couple rides there. It was awesome. Maine trails were great. We went up on some mountain to this overlook, and there were these birds, and they would come land on your glove and just like eat food out of your glove. And they were like, it wasn't like it was a bird sanctuary. They were just wild birds. But as long as you just stood there with your hand out, they'd fly in and land on your hand and eat stuff. It was really cool. Chris Daniels, if Cat releases anything new before a new rear skid, they're silly. I don't disagree with that, man. The only thing I think they could release before a new skid would be to just tweak that 858 so it's working a little bit better and a little more consistent. Scottish Man TV, do I ever see the Backcountry getting a 4-stroke? It's one of those situations where I think it would be silly. I don't know why. You're talking about a non-mountain sled. You're not running chutes, with a Backcountry. Turbo 4-strokes can make so much horsepower that running those massive chutes out in the Backcountry is very beneficial to have a 4-stroke in those cases. But if you're riding a Backcountry because it's a backcountry and you want to go on and off trail, the 4-stroke is of no benefit to you and is only a detriment. I don't see any reason why they would ever make a backcountry with a 4-stroke. I guess if enough people said they wanted one, but to me, if you're like a real 4-stroke guy, then I don't know, maybe you like riding a 4-stroke in the backcountry. I used to do it on nitros all the time, the Nitro XTX. And it was like, gosh, this thing's heavy. Didn't like that. You're very welcome, Jeff Walker. I enjoy this very, very much. In your opinion, how do you compare the Ontario trails to the Quebec trail systems? They're pretty comparable. The Quebec trails are more wide open. They have a lot more wide open, fast, long trail sections. You can put on a lot of miles, especially in northern Quebec, that just go on and on and on. Ontario trails, I think, are probably a little bit tighter in a lot of places. We do have more lakes, so you can run lakes all day in Ontario if you want to, which is super fun. In Quebec, that's harder to do. But there's a lot of... one thing I'll say about Quebec is this. If you go to Quebec for a trip and you stay literally anywhere, it will be nice. There are no not nicest places to stay in Quebec. And even the places that aren't nice are still pretty nice. Likewise with food. It doesn't matter where you go in Quebec, you're going to get a good meal. Always. In Northern Ontario, that it's hit and miss. I have stayed at some pretty sketchy places in Northern Ontario. I've stayed at some really nice ones, but it's not a guarantee like it is in Quebec. And likewise with food, Northern Ontario, you really got to be picky about where you stop to eat because some places are just not, I don't even think they're safe. There are great places to eat, no question, all over Northern Ontario, but it's just not as consistent as in Quebec. So there's some differences there. Caleb L, would you suggest a 600R or 900 Ace for Wisconsin twisty trail riding? 600R, 100%, especially if it's twisty. Sitting on this stool sucks. Yeah, definitely the 600R is going to be lighter, more flickable, easier to handle, have, snappier power. It's going to be a better sled to trail ride on trails like that, for sure. Oh gosh, Milty Stew 204, tell Skidoo to make an adjustable and removable backrest on a Grand Touring, please and thank you. They used to have an adjustable backrest on all of their Grand Tourings. It was awesome. Now they don't, and the backrest is not removable, but the back seat is. So I'm not really sure if that's what you're looking for or not. But the one thing that drives me nuts is that the handles aren't adjustable, and neither are the foot risers for the passengers. So if you got short arms, you're like, it's so horrible. And if you got really short legs, your legs are just dangling. You can't hold on except for your arms, which when I had my daughters back there, they both complained that their arms hurt, their shoulders hurt because they couldn't use their feet for stabilization. So before they get a backrest that's removable or adjustable, they need to get hand holders that are adjustable and footrests that are adjustable in height. Andrew Hill, what's my absolute favorite place to ride with family in the Northeast? I will be perfectly honest with you, man. It is my backyard, and it's not because it's my backyard. Maybe it's because it's my backyard. I absolutely love it here. I love lake hopping. I love the tight trails that we have. Obviously, a lot of that's going to be familiarity, but I just really like the variety in the area that I ride. We have everything, literally everything, except mountains, but that's one thing we don't have, but we have just about everything else. And I really like that. I do like running lakes. It's really fun to run lakes, especially when there's fun, tight trails connecting the lakes. You get that wide open, and you also get that tight, twisty. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do around here. I love riding in Quebec. Yeah, Maine was awesome. Maine was amazing. I've ridden in New Brunswick and Newfoundland. Both of those places are great. I've ridden in Michigan. I've ridden a lot of places, and they're all different. But I really, really, really like sort of north central Ontario where I am right now. Guys, we are at 8:30, which means it's been an hour and a half. I would really love to keep chatting. I really wish I could. There's still some questions to answer, but I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to get to them. I do have to cut these things off in an hour and a half. But I want to say this before we hang up here. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. I really missed it last week. It's going to be tough to just get my fix of doing this every 2 weeks, but maybe that'll change. Who knows as we continue on. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a ton of fun. I love your questions. You guys have great insight. For what it's worth, the questions you guys ask me have many times now, even in just the past 4 weeks, got me thinking differently about certain things and considering different angles on things. So I really appreciate your feedback and what you guys say and the questions you ask. It's actually helping me a lot. I love answering your questions. I hope my answers are helpful. I don't know everything, but I try and help as much as I can and answer the things that I am confident in. I don't ever want to lead you guys astray with what I say. So if I don't know, I'm going to be honest about it. But anyway, keep your questions. If you got other questions, write them down, keep them in a note somewhere. And the next 2 weeks from now, so it'll be 2 Tuesdays from now, we will be back on here, and I will do my best to answer as many of those questions as I can. Another big thank you to Skidoo for making this possible and for working with us on this live stream. They have been great to work with. They are great partners. They make great products. And I love that they've been gracious enough to say, hey, we realize that this is a public live stream. You can talk about whatever you want, but just try and start with a Skidoo topic. They've been awesome about that. Good on them, and we're having a great time with it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate that. If you like the videos you're watching, click the like button. Leave comments on our videos. We do try and read them. And again, it's just like this. It's basically doing the same thing as this, right? You're leaving comments and we try and answer them as best we can. And then turn the bell on if you want to get notifications. So that's my sales pitch for our channel. But other than that, guys, thank you again so much. I've had a great time. This hour and a half has flown by. I can't wait to do it again. So thank you guys, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks, same time, same channel, maybe